how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I was just telling everyone, get your questions in the comments section. We're going to be talking all about wedding etiquette today. We've
Mhm.
tackled decor, design, budget, timelines. So today is etiquette, and I am super excited. Let's get started.
Oh my. All right, while we wait for some questions to come in, let's start high level. Can you talk a little bit about when's the right timing to mail save the dates and invitations?
It's a really good question. I get asked it all the time. We talked a little bit about it when we did planning and timelines. But again, with save the dates, as soon as you've locked in your location and your time, your venue, all those important things, you can really send your save the dates. So the good rule of thumb is to really be able to send them around the 12-month mark, maybe 10 mark. But the more time that your guests have to plan, the better. So save the dates is usually around 12 months before the event. And then invitations, which is usually a good question, is a little bit closer to the actual event date. So that's going to be somewhere between 6, 8, 10 weeks before the event.
Got it. Okay. How do you ask families to help financially with the cost of a wedding? I know that can be a tricky conversation.
Yeah, it can. And to be honest, planning an event like a wedding really is, it's a big financial commitment. And many couples take it upon themselves to pay for the entire event. But there's also couples who need financial investment from family members. And so the best thing to do is to have that conversation early on in the planning process. Of course, you want to sit down. And my number one tip for asking family for financial help when planning a wedding is to go in having some of the facts already on your side.
Mm.
Kind of have a rough budget, right? So that you know what kind of funds you're actually going to be asking for. And then on top of that, the best thing to do is to know there's really two main ways that family can help financially. One is they're going to gift you a sum of money and you put it kind of in your account for wedding and you spend it how you see fit. Another way that families can help financially is to say they'll cover the cost of very specific things for the wedding. So they might say, I would be very happy to cover the cost of florals and entertainment or catering, whatever. And just know there's two different ways to kind of make that work for you. But again, early in the planning process, make sure you have a rough budget and the what you're going to be asking for, and then how they're actually going to be helping you.
Excellent recommendations. We got a question going back to invitations and save the dates. What if you're getting married in under a year? What's the timing look like then?
Good question. Yeah, so everyone's timeline is going to be a little bit different. So again, the rule of thumb with save the dates is as early on in the planning process as you can get those out with the important information, the better. So again, as soon as you've locked in a venue, the time of day and kind of like the main facts, you're going to be able to send that save the date. If you're having a little bit of a timing issue with invitations, the good thing to think about is that you need to be able to send them to everyone and then get your RSVPs back in time in order to give that head count to your vendors. So, anytime you're getting married, whether it's 12 months or less, you really want to have your invitations in the hands of your guests around 8 weeks before your event.
Got a question about a receiving line. So is it okay to skip a receiving line, especially if you're having a church ceremony? And then if so, what can you do instead to not disappoint your guests who want to greet you guys at your wedding?
Yeah, so traditionally a receiving line would be after the ceremony. The bride would be there and, the groom or, the pair that just got married, and then you would have all of the wedding party, and it gives the guests a chance to kind of say hello and walk down the line and have that face-to-face moment. I have seen that many couples are moving away from this sort of thing. The receiving line has not been as kind of trendy right now. If you don't want to do that, it's totally fine. My suggestion would be at the cocktail hour, you as the couple need to make yourself available along with the bridal party. And that's when you're going to be able to have the face-to-face. So if you don't want to have the traditional receiving line, totally fine. Not a trend that you need to always keep, but you want to make sure that your guests have that opportunity to have that moment with you before things get in full swing with the reception.
Yeah. Question about hotel group rates. When's the right time to share that information with your guests who may be traveling from out of town?
Yeah, so as the person planning the event, it's really important that you get into some sort of room block. Even if you end up not using it down the road, it's better for you to be able to have blocked off rooms. You usually get some sort of group discount for all your guests coming in. So it's really, like I say, very early on in the planning process, because you can always ditch it later if you don't need it. But you're going to want to reserve that room block and then get the information out to your guests. So it would really go around the same time frame as when you send the save the dates. You would be sharing the information about the room blocks as well.
Gotcha. Got a question about rehearsal dinner. Who traditionally attends a rehearsal dinner?
Okay, it's a good question. It comes up often, which means people don't automatically know the answer. So a rehearsal dinner traditionally would be for everyone who played a part in the wedding, right? And it gives them the chance to walk through the ceremony, what's going to happen, and then after you're treated to a dinner. So traditionally, it's all the people in the actual ceremony, along with what I always call the VIP, right? The grandma, the grandpa, the parents, all those sort of people. We've seen a lot of couples recently kind of move away from the traditional rehearsal dinner, and that it is some sort of gathering, but it's more inviting most of the out-of-town guests as well to the event. So again, the traditional is that it's just going to have to be the people involved in the actual event, but of course you can make it as big or as small as you see fit for your day.
I love it. All right, Maggie, let's talk about plus ones. So how do you handle if someone asks you if they can have a plus one, or if they RSVP back with saying they're bringing someone, but they weren't really actually invited to have a plus one?
Good question. These are the tricky etiquette things, right? Which is why we're having this day, because it's not always that easy. But let me back up one moment with the plus one and just say, traditionally and kind of most common, if someone is over the age of 21 or kind of post college age, it's nice to offer a plus one if you have it, right? If you're available to be able to do that with your head count. Besides that, you don't have to offer a plus one to someone unless you know that they're in kind of a committed relationship or they're married or something like that, right? So that would be the right thing. To answer your question, if someone responds back with, may I bring, then it comes down to head count. And I will say that sometimes it's like opening the floodgates. You say yes to one person, and then all of a sudden it just becomes everybody else. So it's good just to be honest and say we have limited space due to the venue or due to our guest count. You can also offer and say, as we get closer and we get our RSVPs back, I would happily accept your plus one if we have space for that.
Excellent. And how about children at weddings?
Yeah, I know. That's a question everyone likes to talk about. Here's what I say to begin that question. Plan the day that you want that's going to be special for you and your partner. And if that includes having children at your event, then that's fantastic. But if you are really planning an adult-only ceremony and reception, it's totally fine. But you need to share that information early in the planning process with your guest. So if they're traveling for the event, they know that they have to get childcare coverage, or that they know that their children, are not invited. Now, sometimes it's not just one or the other. You might have very close family to you who might be the flower girl or the ring bearer, and they are going to be at the ceremony and reception. So again, it's just about communication and putting it on places like your wedding website. There's very clever ways to say we love children. However, this is an adult-only reception. So as long as your guests know with enough time to get childcare, it's really, up to you as a couple.
Excellent. We've got a bachelorette party question. Is it appropriate to expect guests to pay a deposit ahead of time to save their spot on the bachelorette, especially when it comes down to booking things like lodging or activities?
Yeah, so the bachelorette weekends, which have become huge events over the past couple of years, right? And a lot of times they require travel and lodging. Again, this is where it comes back to communication. So for whoever is going to be invited to these events or these weekends, everyone needs to know what's expected of them, both financially and the time commitment as well. And so I do think it's okay as a group if you decided that this is what it's going to cost, and everybody is free to, either join or not. So again, if you plan, just have time on your side and be, open and honest with your bridal party or whoever else is coming. But you can, certainly expect people to pay for themselves. It is not something that a bride or a couple would have to, bear the cost of.
And is there typically, a designated host of the bachelorette party?
Sometimes I think they take all different shapes. Sometimes if you have a large bridal party, say 6 or 7, bridesmaids, then they certainly are going to come together to, throw that. If it's a much smaller event and 1 or 2 people are willing to host and pay for it, then that's perfectly okay. What I would say to brides who are planning their perfect bachelorette weekend in their head is to make sure you're on the same page with everyone else who's going to be coming, or your bridal party, so everyone knows what's expected of them, again, both financially and the time commitment.
That makes a lot of sense. And how about throwing a bridal shower? Who traditionally or who would typically host a bridal shower and pay for it?
Yeah, the bridal shower really does come back to the bridal party. A lot of times we'll see if there's a mother of the bride / mother of the groom, this is their event that they can get involved in as well and help host. But it really is provided for the bride by her bridal party and those, few extra VIP people within her family. And it's a way to shower her before the big day with some gifts and celebration. And again, I just always go back to that the bride usually has a vision in her head of what she would like. And then to be able to communicate that with who's ever going to be hosting it is key.
Yeah. Maggie, how about having a sit-down dinner or meal at your wedding? Do you have to do it?
No, you don't. Absolutely not. I have seen really creative weddings recently, heavy on the appetizers, and it's all about more of these grazing tables or grazing stations where you can go up and get food as much as you want. And in that respect, I think those couples are really trying to host more of like a really fun party vibe. They want people dancing more. They want people enjoying the event, as opposed to spending a lot of time at a sit-down event. If you've been dreaming of a sit down, fancy formal dinner, then by means, go do it and enjoy. But there's very creative ways nowadays that you do not have to host that sort of sit down traditional dinner.
I've heard a lot about unplugged ceremonies. What's the best way to kind of communicate that to your guests, that you really want people to be present during their ceremony and keep their phones away?
Yeah, so I remember when this kind of became a big trend. I'd say maybe it was like 6 or 7 years ago now. And for anybody who doesn't know, an unplugged ceremony is simply asking your guests to turn off their phones, put them away. Please don't take pictures. Please be present. I've seen really creative ideas. There are signs that you can buy online that say, please, be with us as we have our unplugged ceremony. We have someone here to capture the photos. Please be present with us. A lot of times couples will put it on their ceremony program, right, as a very easy way to communicate that. I've seen weddings where the officiant says right before we get started, please put your phones away, right? It's kind of like when you're in the movie theater. Please put your phones away, turn them on silent. And really, to me, what that is communicating is that the couple doesn't want a bunch of cameras up in the air taking their photos. They want everyone there to witness the day. And of course, they're going to have paid for a photographer who is going to capture all of the best moments. And some photography that I have seen online, which is a beautiful image of the couple as they're saying their vows, and in the background are like people holding up their phones taking photos, and it kind of ruins the picture. So be respectful if the couple is looking for an unplugged ceremony. Put your phone away and know that the photographer will do all the work.
Excellent. I want to talk a little bit about attire. So can you explain the difference between a formal wedding, a black tie optional, and black tie?
Yes. Okay. This must be one of the questions I get asked all the time, not so much by couples planning, but more by guests who get an invitation and they say, what does this mean? So let's start at the top. Black tie. Black tie means that for men, they're expected to be in a tuxedo, right? And usually that's a black tuxedo. And women are expected to be in some sort of very formal gown. Most of the time it would be a long dress. Although we've seen that kind of creep its way into short dresses as well, but think formal, right? Very formal. Usually it's an evening event, very formal event. So moving forward then to black tie optional, all that really changes is that the men have an option to wear a dark suit as opposed to a tuxedo. So black tie means we're expecting tuxedos. Black tie optional means you may wear a tuxedo or you may wear a suit, but it doesn't really change for the females. That's still a formal sort of dress. And then beyond there, you have formal and semi-formal. And that would just mean that the dress code is a little bit more relaxed. Men are not expected to be in tuxedos. Women are expected to be in more of a cocktail or semi-formal look.
Got it. So interesting. And how about for a bride, if she doesn't want to wear white, what are her options?
Oh gosh, the sky's the limit. And this is one of my favorite things when a bride shows up wearing a dress that makes her feel comfortable and beautiful and happy. So we've seen brides choose everything, right? I mean, I love their champagne and ivory and off-white and all those beautiful colors. We've seen blush pink. We've seen black wedding dresses have a moment recently in the past couple of months. So brides have the opportunity to wear any color. We're seeing metallics and all sorts of fun things in the market right now. So I would say if a bride wants to wear any color on her wedding day, she is more than welcome, and she's going to be happy because she picked something that makes her feel beautiful. But of course, there's always classic white or ivory that brides they get called to that sort of style too. So there's really no etiquette around this. It's you wear the dress that makes you happy and beautiful.
I love that. And how about changing into a reception dress? Is there any protocol or etiquette around that?
Other than you are going to be comfortable and you're going to enjoy. And the idea of a reception dress is that as the evening goes on, usually after we've done the first dance and all of those sort of things, a bride might have the opportunity to change into something, whether it's a jumpsuit or a little white dress, which is always one of my favorite things. And it just gives her the opportunity to wear something also fun and very bride-like. However, she has a little bit more mobility. She can really enjoy the dancing and as the festivities go on in the evening. So it's perfectly open to, the idea that if you want to change as the night goes on as the bride, you certainly can.
I love that. Let's switch over to invitations. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations on how to save on invitations?
Yeah, well, I'll say that most of the brides that I've been talking to in our Diamond Loyalty program here at David's, who have the opportunity to have a wedding consultation with me, have told me recently that they are considering digital invitations. So here's my tip for that. Yes, you're probably going to save because you're going to save on postage and you're going to save on the actual cost of the invitation. If you're choosing the digital route, you will have to think about if there's anyone on your guest list who will not be able to use a digital invitation. If you think about a certain generation, maybe that's grandparents or great grandparents, you might want to be able to just pull a small list, whether it's 10 or 20 people, and print an invitation for them. You're still going to save, but digital invitations are really kind of taking over. I'm surprised how many brides are gravitating towards them. So, that it's certainly an option for brides who are looking to save a little bit.
Awesome. And how about, how do you chase down those guests who didn't send their RSVP back in at the date you requested?
Yeah, so I don't think I have ever talked to a bride ever who got 100% RSVPs back by the date that she asked. So there's two quick things that I will say. Number one, if you're actually sending paper RSVP cards that need to come back to you, on the back of each card, you should put a number. And that number correlates to, your guest list. So if you have number 35, and that would mean that would be Maggie Lord, you have an opportunity to know who has sent it back and who hasn't yet. And then the other thing is you might get back blank save the dates. They forget to fill out their information. So that number on the back of the card, you would know what guest that is. So the follow-up to that is that, yes, you probably will have to do some chasing. And this is where I always say it's a great place to bring your partner in. If it's someone on their side of the family, ask them to text, call, get that information as soon as possible. There's, you can be very nice about it. I need to give my head count to my vendors. We were looking forward to hopefully having you there. Will you be able to join us? Again, sometimes it's friends of the parents. That's an opportunity to get your parents involved. Say, could you please call them or text them? But it happens all the time, and it's just about being diligent and making sure that you get to everyone in some way to get their answer.
I love that. Maggie, we did just get a question about having a Q&A around decor. Do you want to speak a little bit about our last session that we had?
Yeah, so we had a great Ask Maggie Live all about decor and design, and we spent most of the time, you can rewatch it, right? You can definitely find it on David's Bridal. But we spent a lot of time talking about finding decor that's going to really bring to life the style and theme of your wedding. And one thing to keep in mind is that we talked about how a style of a wedding usually can be summed up in one or two words, whether that's classic or boho or backyard or rustic. And then the theme underneath is it starts to kind of pull apart and you bring together all the different design elements that are really going to make your day perfect for you. And there's tons of places to save within your decor and design about picking and choosing what's the most important, elements that you want to bring forward on that day.
Awesome. So Maggie, do you have to tip a wedding vendor?
So tipping wedding vendors is really important. It is expected. Etiquette would tell you it's the right thing to do. A lot of times I will say check your contract with your vendor. Sometimes they will have in that contract, a suggested tip, or they will tell you they're going to add on the gratuity, very much like when you're at a restaurant and it says a group of 6 or more, they're going to automatically put on gratuity. It is important to tip your vendors. Here's what I'll tell you is that you need to make sure that you have either done it before, which I know seems a little crazy, but you're going to be busy on your wedding day, or you assign the task to someone within your bridal party or someone you're close to at the end of the night. If you're going to be giving cash tips, that you have it all set out in different envelopes and you can give it out to the vendors at the end of the event. There's also nothing wrong with tipping the next day, of course, if you're going to be doing it yourself as the bride and you plan on doing it digitally or however you paid with them. But just make sure that you've checked your contract so that you're not double tipping in some way, but definitely tip them for their hard work.
And is it all vendors involved, or are there certain vendors that would, have different roles for different vendors?
Right. So I would say those vendors such as photographers and caterers and bartenders, right, who are physically working your event, those hours, servers, things like that. Those are the most important ones to tip. Outside of that, you're not really you don't have to tip a venue unless they offer somebody like a coordinator or an event planner the day of. So when you really think about it, it's the most important people to tip are the people who are physically working for the hours that your event is happening and the ones who have actually making the event work.
Makes a lot of sense. And Maggie, how about a cash bar?
There's nothing wrong with it. It happens all the time. Again, the only suggestion I have is if you're having a cash bar, you need to communicate that to your guests in some way. Obviously it doesn't mean that you only can pay in cash, right? Most places can take cards as well, and most people have that. But it's a nice thing to do to let people know. I can't tell you the amount of times I've gone to a wedding with just maybe like my ID and my purse and not thinking I would need a credit card for anything. So, you can communicate that as well to people. But if that's what's going to work best for your budget, you can totally do that. Or the next step from that would be do something like signature drinks, which is another one of my favorites. So you have beer, wine, and 1 or 2 signature drinks, and it limits the cost.
That's an excellent idea. I love the concept of signature drinks.
I do too. I love it.
Fun. So let's move on to the registry for a little bit. How do you politely ask for cash on your registry?
Yeah. So, what I hear from couples a lot is that they maybe are all set up in their house and they don't need 400 different mixing bowls or things like that. And if that's the case, then, there's a lot of different registry programs out there that will allow you to put cash on your registry. They'll also allow you to put experiences or crowdsourcing, which is really, really fun right now. So you can say, help us pay for our honeymoon, and people can give you just a little bit towards that event. So again, communication, I always say you can spread the word. And then the other thing is if your registry is somewhat limited in items that are on there, they're going to understand that you probably want cash. So you can certainly look for registry options that offer the cash option there. But again, if your registry doesn't, you have the opportunity to kind of limit how much you have on there. And therefore it's kind of giving the signal that you would like cash instead.
Excellent recommendations. Maggie, do couples have to have a head table at their wedding?
No, and we talked a little bit about this in our decor and design before. Traditionally a head table is at some, kind of the focal point of the reception, and it consists of having the couple and then the bridal party and things like that. You don't have to do that. We've seen couples really love sweetheart tables, which is just the couple who just got married. I mentioned it before, but couples have gotten creative. Sometimes they have just the maid of honor, and if they have the best man, sometimes they have dinner with just the 2 sets of parents of the couple, which is also really sweet. So no, absolutely, you don't need to. You can follow any rule that is going to make your reception perfect for you.
Perfect. So a lot of couples sometimes opt to have kind of a next day brunch for all of their guests. Do couples have to host that for their guests?
No, it's not a must. It's not something that you have to have. I always think it's lovely it really was started as a way to say goodbye to your guests one more time as they leave, right? And perhaps travel back to wherever they came from. So a lot of people will host a brunch. Sometimes there's even a morning sort of like coffee and send off sort of thing. If you have a space in your budget to do it, I think it's really nice. It's a lovely way to connect with the guest again. Perhaps you didn't even have a moment to speak with them at the ceremony and reception. I do think it's nice. A lot of people keep it simple, though. They don't go over the top, and they have it simply at the hotel, maybe where most guests are staying. And the hotel might be able to provide you with a lot of the food and coffee and beverages and things like that. So it doesn't have to be fancy or flashy, but it is a really nice, polite way to thank your guests for coming, give them some coffee and food as they start to travel back.
And a little few more minutes with them. That's nice.
That's right.
Maggie, when do you recommend sending registry information out?
Right. So a lot of couples, after they get engaged, the word spreads that they're engaged and people want to send them an engagement present. So I always say there's like 2 different versions of your registry. You're going to want to populate it with some really nice, fun things right after you've gotten engaged for those who will want to send you engagement presents. And then as you get closer to your event, closer to the bridal shower as well, if you're hosting one, you're going to want to populate your registry again and make sure that items are available and that you might want to fill it a little bit more as you get closer to the event. Don't forget though, a lot of times people will send you the gift after the wedding. And so you're going to want to check your registry after to make sure that items that you put in there are still available and that there's things to choose from, because guests will send you presents after the event as well.
Oh, that's a great recommendation. We got a question about, what type of information should be included on your save the date?
Okay, so the save the date is really simple communication to your guest when your event is, so the date, the time, the location of both perhaps the ceremony and reception, right, if they're in different places, and then any sort of travel information. If they need to take flights, what's the best airport to fly into, where should they look to stay. You can also communicate what the order of events is going to be. So you're basically saying, please save the date for our wedding. However, we're also having, the night before we're having an event and we're also hosting a brunch afterwards. But the most important piece of information on that save the date is, of course, the time, the location, and where they need to be traveling or staying.
Got it. Got a really good question about QR codes for registries. Is there any etiquette around it? Pros, cons, yes, no?
I personally am really obsessed with this idea. I am hearing it left and right from brides in our diamond consultations. They're putting QR codes on everything. And it doesn't surprise me. I think with the rise of the QR codes around the pandemic, at every restaurant you went to, it was a QR code that linked to their menu. I think people have gotten really used to this way of sharing information. I actually think it's really fun. If you want to put a QR code on your save the date, go ahead. It could, link right to your wedding website with more information. So I'm seeing QR codes pop up all the time. You can certainly get them personalized. You can make them, really interesting. But I think it's how the future of brides are going to be communicating with their guest list.
I love it. And actually kind of going off of that, you kind of touched on this, but is it appropriate to kind of, instead of putting all of that information on your save the date, could you put something like a QR code or a link to your wedding website where you have all that information?
Yep. 100%. So traditionally, most couples within the last, 10 or 15 years would have a wedding website and they would put, the information about how to find that on the save the date. Today, it's really just taking it one step further. And so instead of having to type in the information, right, they can just scan the QR code, it pops right up. My only suggestion is you might want to keep that list of the small group of people who won't be able to access it that way, and that's okay. But just you might need to share that information with them in a different way besides digital.
That's a great recommendation. Okay, we are coming up on time, but I do want to ask this one final question.
Yep.
We know there's a lot of pent-up demand with a lot of couples getting married in the next couple of years, and venue availability is tricky. Can you talk a little bit about weekday weddings? Is it inconvenient for your guests?
Okay, so look, weekday weddings have become very popular. Guests are used to seeing it now on invitations, right? And that, of course, has been from the past couple of years of planning woes and how hard it was to find a location and a date. The only thing I will say is that it usually means people might have to take time off of work or have, they have other weekday commitments that they might have to move around. So I don't think it's inconvenient because you get to plan the day that you want as the couple, but communicate it. So if you know you're going to have a Thursday night or a Tuesday afternoon wedding, if you can give your guests the heads up a little bit earlier on in the planning process, it just going to make it smoother and allow more guests to be able to be with you, because they might need to move around some things. But you know, I think it's just it speaks to where we are in wedding planning, and it's really hard to get a venue. So in many cases, couples are taking the day that they can get.
Excellent recommendations. Maggie, with our last minute we have together, do you have any final tips, tricks around etiquette that you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah, so you know, there's really like traditional wedding etiquette and things, but we're seeing, of course, a lot of things be broken or being updated and reflecting the couples that are getting married today. So you know, I always say there are no rules in wedding planning. If you don't want to follow something, some traditional thing in wedding planning, you certainly don't have to. There's really fun traditional etiquette things, something borrowed, something blue, right? All of those sort of things. If it works for you, bring it into your event. If it doesn't, you certainly don't have to have it. There's no hard and fast rules when planning your wedding.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time and expertise, Maggie.
All right, this was so much fun. I'll see you next time.
Great being with you.
Bye.
Bye.